July in Texas always comes with its own kind of heat, the kind that clings to your skin like a reminder that some things in life are simply out of your control. That afternoon, the thermometer on my porch read 39 degrees, not a single breeze in sight. Walking from the parking lot into the building felt like stepping through two different seasons. But the cold waiting for me in Rachel's conference room went far beyond anything an air conditioner could produce. I've climbed utility poles in storms, hung from steel beams under gray skies, and had wind slap my hands numb. But the cold in that room hit differently. It was the kind that told you you're about to hear something you won't enjoy swallowing. I took the seat across from her. Rachel smoothed the collar of her shirt until it looked camera ready, like she was preparing for a televised interview. In front of her sat the promotion file I had spent weeks updating. To me, it was the sum of more than 20 years. Overnight shifts, first light mornings when the whole town was still wrapped in fog. But from the way she nudged it back and forth with her fingertips, I could tell she hadn't read a single page. It was just a prop for the performance she was about to finish. Rachel spoke first. Her voice was soft, sweet, exactly the tone people use when they're about to slip a sharp blade under velvet. I'd heard that voice from plenty of managers in my life, the kind who are scared of rain but love standing by the window talking about storms, the kind who never climb a roof to fix a panel but always want to discuss long-term strategy. I recognized them from the very first breath. Then she said the line I had already predicted, though hearing it out loud still pricked a nerve. You don't have leadership potential. The sentence dropped into the room like an ice cube hitting a still glass of water. I looked straight at her, not to intimidate her, but to make sure I hadn't misheard. I've lived long enough to know that words like potential or leadership often exist to cover up something simpler, that they want you exactly where you are because that's what's convenient for them. And so I answered slowly, just enough for the meaning to land where it needed to land. Do you mean I don't have leadership potential, or I don't fit the story you're planning to tell in that meeting? Her eye twitched. She glanced away as if I'd asked for something she wasn't ready to face. And then the speech began, every buzzword polished, every phrase rehearsed. Visibility, strategic posture, executive narrative. It sounded like the menu of a fancy restaurant where everyone still leaves hungry. I sat there nodding out of courtesy while thinking something that almost made me laugh. If the company had to pay for every buzzword she used, we'd be bankrupt by next week. Rachel kept talking, but honestly, nothing after that mattered. Once people have made up their minds, all they need is a pretty enough explanation. And the listener just needs enough patience not to laugh at the wrong moment. She closed with a polite smile, the kind you learn at a weekend management workshop. I thanked her, stood up, and neither of us offered a handshake. We both knew neither of us truly wanted that. Outside in the hallway, I drew a long breath. Not because I was sad. I've lived long enough to tell the difference between disappointment and clarity. And this was clarity, the kind that makes you feel lighter, like taking off a backpack you'd carried too long without realizing how heavy it was. One thought crossed my mind, short, blunt, completely honest. I've walked too many extra miles for people who can't take a single step. The moment I thought it, everything else fell into place. The unpaid overtime, the nights sleeping in the truck at 3 a.m. just to fix a line everyone assumed was unimportant. The meetings where people read the exact words I wrote, but couldn't remember who wrote them. Suddenly it was all clear, and not painful at all. Maybe that's what happens when things finally end. The anger fades, and only the truth stays. I know a lot of people watching this have felt that too. The feeling of being judged by someone who never understood what you actually do. Someone who talks about leadership but doesn't know how their own system works. I know plenty of you have stood in front of a cold conference and heard that same sentence. You don't have leadership potential. If you're one of them, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Texas, California, New York? Maybe even Alaska? I genuinely want to know. I want to know if you've ever met someone like Rachel and how you handled it. Drop a comment, tell me your story, because I can promise you one thing. None of us is alone in meetings like this. After walking out of that conference room, I drove home without thinking about the words, "not enough leadership potential anymore." The only thing replaying in my mind, looping like an old film reel, was the image of my father standing beside that yellow electric utility truck. I was 17 back then, standing in the same kind of heat as today, watching him hold the old toolkit he liked to call the town's lifeline. I didn't choose this work by accident. I chose it because I grew up among cables, copper coils, and the low humming of transformers. My father was the first person to teach me that electricity isn't just what keeps a light bulb glowing. It keeps ventilators running. It keeps the refrigerators in the nursing home from shutting down. It keeps an entire town functioning like a living body. And I remember clearly what he told me on the last night we worked a shift together before he retired. You don't just keep the lights on, you keep the town alive. Those words stayed with me for 25 years, often louder than thunder in storm season. 25 years isn't a lifetime, but it is long enough to watch one generation of workers leave and another arrive, long enough to know that the people working quietly in the background rarely show up in the year-end reports. Texas storms are a test only those who've lived them would understand. Rain stings your skin, wind is strong enough to rip off your hard hat, and sometimes you're standing on a ladder shaking under you while your hands have to stay steady enough to reconnect a live line. One night I worked 12 straight hours in hail, going through 6 pairs of gloves because they were soaked beyond use. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but the daycare across the road had lost power, and inside were 6 newborns relying on incubators. I will never forget the nurse's gasp when the power came back on. There were other nights that lasted 12 hours but felt like a blink. Nights so quiet you could hear the station's cooling fans spinning like a steady breath. In those moments, I often wondered why work like this never made it into company conferences. Probably because it wasn't shiny enough. No one takes pictures of you at 3 in the morning, standing alone in a flooded field, holding the old toolbox my father left me. No one reports it when you open a transformer buried in mud and literally slam the toolbox on the ground to dry it out. And funny enough, after that hit, it worked again. I remember letting out a breath while Hawkins, standing behind me, muttered that this technique was not covered in any safety class. Speaking of Hawkins, he still makes me laugh. The old man is living proof that experience can outthink any measuring device. Hawkins has this strange ability. 5 seconds looking at a piece of equipment, and he knows whether it is about to fail. He never explained how. He just said he could read the complaints of metal. Outsiders thought he was just a cranky old man talking nonsense. But I worked with him long enough to know that when he said a transformer was sad, I needed to grab my insulated gloves immediately. He grumbled a lot, mostly about the company's new policies that he called decorations on paper. But I knew he cared about everyone's safety more than anyone else. In those 25 years, I fixed hundreds of failures, from tiny glitches to moments when the whole town was seconds away from darkness. Many times I was the only one who understood what was actually happening, but I never signed my name on the final reports. I always thought that was just how this job worked. You do it out of responsibility, not for your picture to show up on some internal newsletter. Maybe that's why people like Rachel never saw what I really did. She only saw the last bullet point in the report, the one that said the issue has been resolved. And when that report made it to the executive meeting, she was the one presenting it. I sat in the audience and never felt bothered, at least not until the day she told me I didn't have leadership potential. To be fair, I wasn't angry. I just found it ironic in its own way. There are people in my line of work who spend their whole lives without needing a title because the job itself already validates who they are. But corporate life plays by different rules. It prefers people who sound polished over people who know how to open a burning unit without letting it blow. So I kept doing my job, quietly and steadily, like the very lights I made sure never went out. That quietness was the reason I wasn't surprised when everything started to unravel, simply because I walked out of that conference room with one decision. I would stop carrying what was never mine to carry. But that part belongs to the next chapter. In this moment, the only thing I remember clearly is what my father said. You keep the town alive. And for 25 years, I did exactly that, even if no one ever told the story once. The next morning, when I walked into the company building, I knew I was experiencing something strange. It wasn't the weather, and it wasn't the meeting from yesterday. It was me. For the first time in many years, I arrived at exactly on time. Not a minute early, no 7:30 routine to check whether someone had forgotten a report overnight, no detour to the machine room to listen for any wobble in the cooling fans. I just walked in at 8 on the dot, clocked in, and made myself a cup of coffee light enough not to make my heart race. It felt strange, like the first time you stop wearing the old jacket you've carried for years. Still you, but lighter somehow. As I walked down the hallway, a few coworkers stared at me like I had changed professions and was now working 9 to 5 for a law firm. That evening, the real change arrived. At 10 sharp, I turned off my work phone. Not silent mode, not vibrate. Off. Completely off. I hadn't done that in 20 years. Every night, I kept the phone beside me in case an emergency alert came in. But that night, I looked at the screen for a few seconds, then pressed the power button the way you close a chapter. When I stepped inside my house and kicked off my worn shoes, my wife came out from the kitchen. She looked me up and down with an expression she didn't even try to hide. "You are home this early?" I nodded. I was home on time. She folded her arms, tilted her head, and said the line that I am sure many watching this will laugh at because it sounds so familiar. "Who are you and what have you done with my husband?" I laughed, really laughed, like I hadn't in years. She asked again, half joking, half suspicious, "You're having an affair." I told her that if I were, I must have the stamina of a professional athlete, because I've been doing overnight shifts for 20 years and still somehow have time for an affair. She snorted and told me to wash my hands for dinner. Turns out coming home on time made her more suspicious than seeing me climb rooftops with electrical gear during storm season. The next workday started with a familiar scene, but it felt different in a way that's hard to describe. A young technician rushed into my office with the look of someone who had just watched a power line explode. He held out his phone, pointed at an error message on the server monitor, and said, voice shaking, "Uncle Thomas, this thing broke again. Can you fix it for me?" I looked at the message for 2 seconds. A basic error, the kind you can solve after reading the manual for 3 minutes. I lifted my head and saw him waiting for me to jump in the way I always did. But this time was different. I spoke gently, almost without expression. "If I fix it for you, you will keep making the same mistake for the next 20 years. He froze like his brain was trying to download an update it had never encountered. I handed him the manual and told him to read the first 3 lines. Honestly, I didn't feel triumphant. It just felt like time for everyone to do their own job. At noon that day, I received an email from Rachel. It wasn't long, but it carried enough hints for me to understand the message. She wrote that lately the department lacked proactive collaboration from certain senior team members, which made the workflow less agile in our challenging operational environment. In other words, she wanted me to go back to being the capeless superhero. I replied with a calm tone that surprised even me. I wrote, "I am following my job description precisely to show you were absolutely right when you said I do not have leadership potential." One sentence, nothing added. If written words had a voice, that line would sound like clear water poured into a glass. No edge, no anger, just unmistakably clear. Around 3 in the afternoon, the alert system beeped its familiar long tone. That sound usually made me jump to my feet like a soldier hearing an alarm. But today, I stayed seated, sipping cold coffee, watching the young technicians scramble like lost chicks. One of them turned to me, eyes wide with expectation. "Uncle Thomas, the North Station is reporting abnormal heat." I nodded like I was listening to a weather update. I asked him what his shift assignment was today. He stuttered, "Level 1 alert handling." I said, "Then handle it." The room went silent for a few seconds. No one was used to seeing me stay seated. I figured they were wondering whether I was sick or possessed. But no, I was just letting them do the work they should have been doing all along. I stood up only to take out the trash. Behind me, the whole team stared as if they couldn't believe what just happened. And I'll admit something. That day, for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet, indescribable lightness mixed with a hint of satisfaction. Not because they were panicking, but because I finally stopped trying to save the world when no one remembered my name. And that was only the beginning of what was coming next. Texas moved into an extreme heat wave just a few days after I decided to live strictly by my job description. The phrase extreme heat wave sounds mild, but in reality, it feels like standing outside a pottery kiln. The thermometer read 42 degrees, and the asphalt was so hot you could hear the oil in it bubbling just by standing nearby. People kept their curtains drawn tight, and dogs lay flat in the yard without a bark left in them. Only one thing in this town was never allowed to grow tired: the electric grid. The operations room started the morning shift with faces more serious than usual. Everyone knew a heat wave like this was the kind of test no one wanted to take. Normally, I would arrive early to check a few sensitive points, but today I arrived exactly on time. 8 sharp, not 1 second early. That alone made a few people glance over, as if they were waiting to see what other changes might follow. The first incident hit around 10. A series of capacity alerts lit up. The grid was stretched like a line pulled too tight. But the real issue wasn't the alert, it was the reaction of the operators. The new technician handling load distribution tried shifting power based on the color map, like he was doing a puzzle. The trouble was that in a heat wave like this, every decision had to be based on protecting lives, not which building paid the higher bill. He accidentally diverted most of the capacity to the shopping center, pushing the nursing home on the south side of town to the lowest priority. 5 minutes later, the nursing home lost cooling in 2 wings. Elderly residents began struggling to breathe, and medical equipment switched to backup batteries. When the phone rang in the operations room, the entire team froze. The nurse's voice on the line shook so much that you could tell how bad it was without hearing the details. A patient with severe pulmonary disease had less than 6 minutes of battery left on her ventilator. That is the moment this job reveals its truest form. Not formulas, not reports, not meetings, life and death, nothing more. I looked at the young technician standing near the screen. His face had drained of color. Normally, my instinct would have launched me out of my chair to take control and fix everything in 15 seconds. But now was the moment to choose the right path, not the familiar one. I stepped toward him and asked in the calmest voice possible so I wouldn't add weight to his panic. "What is your shift assignment today?" He swallowed hard and whispered, "Priority-based load optimization." "Then do it." I spoke slowly, clearly, no raised tone, but no loosened standards either. He trembled, but he opened the dispatch screen. I stood beside him, not touching a single button. I gave only the minimum guidance. Drop capacity in the East Office District, shift the load to the residential zone, push the nursing home to level 1 priority. Not rushed, not frantic, but precise. After about 60 seconds, power stabilized at the nursing home. The nurse exhaled so loudly through the phone that I heard the wooden chair under her shake. The young technician nearly collapsed from relief. I placed a hand on his shoulder just for a second, enough to let him know he had done something truly important, something he should have known long before. When Rachel arrived, her heels hit the floor with annoyed precision. She didn't need anyone to explain. She had already heard. She asked loudly as if making a speech for a camera. Why did the equipment fail? Why wasn't the system upgraded? Why did operations allow this incident? She asked everything except the only question that mattered: who was directing and who actually understood the procedure? I looked at her, not angry, but carrying a deep kind of exhaustion. I spoke softly but clearly. The equipment did not fail. The procedure was not lacking. Only the operator did not receive the right guidance. The whole room fell silent. Rachel stared at me like I had insulted her job description. But she knew I was right, and that was exactly what irritated her the most. The rest of the afternoon passed in tense quiet. The technicians stared at their screens with more focus than usual. They no longer looked toward me. They had seen the most important truth. I wasn't abandoning them. I was forcing them to become who they were supposed to be. When I stepped out of the operations room as the sky turned into that deep Texas orange, I looked toward the nursing home. Its lights were steady again. No flicker, no alerts. I stood for a moment in the parking lot, letting the heat rise against my face like a reminder. Sometimes the system tells the truth, with warnings far clearer than anything people say to each other. And today, the system told us all what we needed to hear. A town cannot be safe if the people operating it do not understand the weight of every decision. What I did not expect was that this was only the first part of a whole chain of truths the system was about to reveal, one alert after another, louder, clearer, until no one could pretend not to know anymore. 3 days after the brutal heatwave, I wasn't surprised to see our town show up in the news. Not a headline story, but enough for people to ask, why did the nursing home lose cooling during a record-breaking heatwave? When the questions outnumbered the explanations, the company immediately announced an urgent internal review. People are good at naming things gently. In reality, it only meant who was taking the blame. The meeting was held in the third-floor conference room. Not as cold as Rachel's, but tense enough that one heavy breath might snap a few chairs in half. Legal was there, HR was there, public relations was there, Rachel was there, and so was I. On the screen was a neat title, Evaluation of Operational Procedures Under Abnormal Conditions. A title trying very hard not to use the word failure. Rachel spoke first. She stood up with the posture of someone who had rehearsed in the mirror all night. Her slides were full of charts, upward arrows, and polished colors. She talked about climate change, sudden spikes in electricity demand, and aging infrastructure. According to her, everything was nature's fault. Then she moved to internal factors, lowering her voice as if she were about to reveal something delicate. She described how certain seasoned personnel had difficulty adapting to new work methods, and that proactive collaboration had not met expectations. She didn't need to name anyone. Everyone in the room knew she meant me. I listened without feeling a spark of anger. It was like I had stepped outside the story a long time ago. When people are afraid of explaining the weakness of a system, they look for a face to place on the shelf. Today, that face was mine. When it was my turn to present the technical perspective, I opened my laptop. They looked as if they expected a short statement and a quick exit, but I chose a more honest path. I opened the first email on the screen. The subject line read, Operational Risks Under Extreme Weather Conditions. Date sent 2 years ago. The recipient list included Rachel. In it, I clearly listed the lack of training in load prioritization, over-reliance on the knowledge of a few individuals, and risk to the nursing home and hospital. I proposed a 6-month training program with a detailed plan attached. The email was never answered. The room went silent immediately. No one spoke, no one coughed, no one shifted. Only the projector hummed. I opened the training document I had written. It had dates, version numbers, and a list of employees who would need the training. At the bottom was a small box that said, Acknowledgement of Review. Completely empty. No blame, no accusation. Just simple math on display, warning plus ignorance equals risk. Then I opened the incident logs. 3 years of notes, line by line. Many entries said the same thing. New staff unaware of load priorities, temporary fix applied, additional training required. I didn't need to say anything. Just scrolling was enough for them to see the pattern. No one reacted. Finally, Hawkins, the oldest person in the room, leaned back in his chair, stared at the screen, and spoke in his usual weather report tone. If they had read your procedures at least once, I would have retired a long time ago. The whole room laughed on instinct, a mix of embarrassment and relief. Rachel didn't laugh. She gripped the stack of papers in front of her as if squeezing hard enough might erase reality. She offered a few sentences about budget, strategic priorities, and not every proposal can be implemented at the right moment. I listened just enough to understand she was trying to steer the story away from herself. When she finished, I asked one single question. Of all the things you prioritize, have you ever prioritized making sure new technicians know to protect the nursing home before the shopping center? No one answered, but the silence spoke louder than any microphone. The meeting ended with the usual corporate phrases, thank you for sharing, we will review, the process will be updated. All familiar, but for the first time I didn't feel the urge to fix everything. I just felt light. I walked to the equipment room for a moment before heading back to my desk. The indicator lights on the control cabinets blinked steadily. The system had stabilized again after days of chaos. I stood there and realized I had spent years living like that green light on the control board. Always on, Always ready, always in the right place. And just like that light, no one noticed it until it went dark. Back at my desk, I opened my drawer and took out a blank sheet of paper. I didn't write a long speech. No bitterness, no self-pity, just what needed to be written. I was resigning. With proper notice, I would hand over everything cleanly. And thank you for the years of work. When I set down the pen, it felt like placing a heavy toolbox on the ground after a very long walk. My shoulders loosened. My chest loosened. My mind loosened. Not sadness, not anger. Just the calm of an autumn lake after the last gust of wind passes through. I scanned the letter and sent it to HR and Rachel. No expectations, no waiting for replies. The important thing wasn't how they handled it. It was that I had finally stepped away from a role I no longer wanted to play. That day, when I left the building, the Texas sun was still pounding the city like it was trying to melt it. But for the first time in years, the air felt strangely breathable. I didn't know what waited ahead, but I knew one thing for certain. I had chosen the right moment to walk away from a place that no longer deserved what I had given it. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to finish a few final handover items. I hadn't even turned on my computer when a message came from Victor. Thomas, meet me in the small conference room on the second floor. Victor wasn't the type to text short sentences, so those 9 words told me everything I needed to know. My resignation had reached the person who truly made decisions. When I walked into the small conference room, Victor was already there. No suit, no tie, just a rolled-up shirt. In front of him was a thick stack of papers. I recognized it instantly. The operations log I had written over the past 3 years. Sit, he said, not angry, not blaming, but with the voice of a man who had read something that kept him awake all night. He flipped the first page of the log. Training proposal, immediate priority. The next page, new staff not familiar with the procedure, high risk during extreme weather. Another page, the load priority system needs reassessment. Victor spoke quietly but clearly, and I read everything. Twice, I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the most respectful answer. He turned another page. You wrote all of this yourself. I wrote it because no one else understood the system the way I did. Victor leaned back and exhaled heavily. You know, almost every operational procedure this company uses was created by you. He emphasized every word as if he himself had just realized the truth of what he was saying. Then he looked at me with the eyes of someone who had finally noticed something he should have seen a long time ago. Do you remember I used to be a technician? That made me look up. Very few people in the company knew that. Victor had once climbed poles and worked night shifts like I did. Only after an accident weakened his leg did he move into management. Back then, he said, I thought if I did my job well, the system would be fine. But I learned something. A system cannot depend on one person. A simple sentence, but not an easy one to admit. You're walking away, he continued. I understand why. But if you leave now, we are not just losing an employee. We are losing the person holding the backbone of this entire operation. I answered calmly, you can replace me, but it will take time. And sometimes the cost is something no one wants. Victor didn't flinch at the word ton. He simply nodded. He knew I meant human lives, not equipment. He pulled out another sheet, a proposal for a new position. I want to create a new role for you, not through Rachel. You report directly to me, full authority to train, rewrite procedures, and hire technicians. I looked at the proposal, then at him. I don't need a title, I said. I need the system to change. Victor was silent for a few seconds, but this time it was the silence of someone thinking, not avoiding. What do you believe needs to change, he asked. First, I said, retrain the entire load priority process. No more letting new technicians learn by guessing. I want mandatory document updates, not papers sitting forgotten in drawers. And the people leading the department need to understand what they are managing, not just the slides in the meeting. Victor pressed his hands against the table. You want to rewrite the entire system. I want it to work the way it is supposed to work, I said. If nothing changes, I am not staying. No raised voice. But the weight of the sentence made the room go silent. Victor stared at the log for a long moment. Do you know the last time I reviewed an operational report carefully? I'm guessing it's been a long time, I said. Long enough that I forgot what keeps this town running is expertise, not meetings. He looked straight at me. Give me the weekend. I don't want to lose you. But if I want you to stay, I need to prove I deserve it. Those words surprised me more than any job offer. I stood up. We shook hands. No promises, no commitments. Just a handshake between two people who had once climbed transformer stations in storms, knowing the electric grid doesn't care whether the operator wears a suit or a safety jacket. Walking into the hallway, I felt something shift. Victor had finally seen the real problem. Not my problem, the company's problem. And that was what I had been waiting for a long time. I didn't know what he planned to do over the weekend, but for the first time I felt Victor was finally awake, in every sense of the word. And I, after years of holding everything up alone, finally didn't feel alone in the fight anymore. Just that feeling alone was enough for me to walk out of the room a little lighter. I had just closed my notebook when the office door swung open. No knock, no warning. Rachel stood there, phone in hand, her expression tighter than the Texas heat outside. "We need to talk," she said, her voice not loud but sharp enough to cut the air. I set my pen down. "All right," she turned and walked ahead without waiting. I followed her into a small meeting room separated from operations. The room held nothing but a long table, 4 chairs, and a cold yellow light. Rachel shut the door but left the blinds open, the kind of person who wants to look transparent even when she isn't. She sat, arms crossed. "Do you know what you're doing?" "Depends on which matter you are referring to," I said. She leaned forward. "You are making me look bad in front of the entire company." I leaned back. "I'm not doing anything. I simply presented the documents I wrote. The truth handles the part where someone looks bad." Rachel pressed her lips together and inhaled sharply. "Could you not speak like that?" "Like what?" I asked. Like you're so calm, it feels like you're looking down at everyone from above." "I'm just stating the truth," I said, "and the truth is always calm." She tapped her fingers on the table, not to make noise, but to keep herself steady. "You made me look incompetent in that internal review." "I didn't make you look that way," I said. "I just turned on the light. The light doesn't decide the shape of the shadow." Rachel fell quiet for a few seconds. Not the angry kind of silence, but the kind where someone is deciding whether to admit something uncomfortable. She spoke more slowly. "You think I don't care, do you? You think I don't care about safety?" "I think you care," I said, "just not about the right thing." "What is that supposed to mean?" "I think you care more about your position than about the system." The sentence pushed her slightly back into her chair, as if wrenched in cold water. She didn't argue right away. Not because she agreed, but because she knew I wasn't wrong. "Do you know why I never recommended you for promotion?" she asked quietly. "It wasn't because you weren't good. It was because if you moved up, I'd lose the one person who kept this department functioning." I nodded. "I know. You are the only one I trust," she added, for the first time without her usual mask. "Trusting me is one thing," I said. "Holding me down so you can feel safe is another." She turned her face away, avoiding my eyes. "I wasn't holding you down. I think you know better than anyone," I said, "that keeping me under a low ceiling wasn't for the system's good. It was for yours." Rachel took a deep breath. She clasped her hands together on the table, as if trying to stop them from shaking. "I have been a manager for 10 years. The first person who trained me told me, 'Don't let anyone know your department has problems. Keep everything looking fine, even if you have to cover it up.' And you were very good at that," I said, "until the temperature hit 42 degrees and the system couldn't hide anything anymore." She let out a small, joyless laugh. "I got used to relying on you. So used to it that I believed as long as you were there, I wouldn't have to face what was underneath the rug." "The rug got pulled," I said, "and that's not on me. That's years of covering instead of fixing." Rachel pressed her fingertips to her temple, as if finally acknowledging something she had avoided. Then she lifted her head. "Do you hate me?" "I don't hate anyone," I said. "I just don't respect the way you work." She nodded slowly, like someone accepting a verdict they already knew. "Victor will change everything if you take that new role," she said, "and I won't be the one controlling this department anymore." "I don't want control," I said. "I want the system to work. And if that means people have to relearn everything from the ground up, then that's what needs to happen. She looked at me longer than usual. Are you staying? I haven't decided, I said. But if I stay, things will be different. No more me standing in the dark so someone else can shine. I turn on every light, not a threat, just the truth about how I would work if I returned. Rachel stood. For a moment, she looked smaller, more human. Not a manager giving directives, but someone facing the consequence of old choices. Whether you believe it or not, she said, I really don't want to lose you. Not just because of the bub. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure whether she meant it for me or for everything I carried on her behalf all these years. She opened the door and left, her faint perfume lingering in the room, a fading mark of someone trying to hold on to whatever power she had left. I sat back at my desk. A new email popped up. Sender, Victor. Subject, formal offer. I opened it. The new role description, full authority, and reform roadmap. But I didn't read all the way through. My eyes stopped at the last line. The rest we discussed privately. No Rachel, no intermediaries. I leaned back in my chair. The room, silent after the confrontation, suddenly felt like it had a new breath. Not because of a title, not because of authority, but because for the first time in years, someone with real power was finally looking at the problem and not away from it. And Rachel, she had nowhere left to hide. As for me, I had no reason left to carry anyone else's weight. It took me exactly 2 days to reply to Victor's email. Not because I hesitated about the new position, but because I wanted to be sure I was staying for the right reason. When I finally answered, I agreed. Victor called immediately, as if he had been waiting beside the phone. Sooner than I expected, he said, let's get to work. So Monday morning, I walked into the office with a title so new the administrative team had to confirm it twice. Director of Grid Resilience. A long name, but the job was simple. Make sure this grid never collapses again. I chose the first 3 people from my team. Not the top performers on paper, but the ones who had worked in the shadows their whole careers. A young tech named Malik, usually assigned busy work because he lacked experience. Yet the only person who had ever read a circuit map faster than I did. An engineer named Marla, labeled as too quiet to lead projects, but always the one who stayed late to fix things no one else noticed. And Hawkins, of course. Even though he kept saying, let me retire already, everyone knew he would die of boredom if he couldn't poke at the electrical system at least 3 times a day. Victor approved in under 2 minutes. I trust your judgment, he said. We started rebuilding the procedures. Not patching, not taping, rebuilding. Anything unclear was rewritten. Anything based on memory went into documentation. Anything dependent on one person was shared with the team. When I sent the first draft to other departments, Rachel replied within half an hour. Too complicated. Not aligned with our current model. I responded with a data sheet spanning more than 3 pages. 3 years of logs, average response times, repeated errors, training gaps, bottlenecks, and one concluding line. The current model is not aligned with itself, no reply. Not because she agreed, but because numbers leave no room to argue. Hawkins treated the rebuild like a career revival. Every time I introduced a new procedure, he nodded and said, someone finally decided to clean out this storage room. One Friday afternoon, when I walked past the equipment testing area, I saw a scene that made me laugh out loud for the first time in months. Hawkins stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, looking like a stern professor. In front of him stood Malik and Marla, each holding a coil of wire, a fuse block, and wearing an identical, confused expression. Listen, Hawkins said, the best part of this job is not seeing the machine run. It is knowing when it is about to stop running. Malik frowned. And how do you know that? Hawkins held up his old equipment box. If it smells like a freezer, nobody has opened in months. You're fine. If it smells like burnt hair. Run. I leaned against the wall and smiled. He called that false fire. Hawkins looked at me. Don't you dare rewrite this procedure. This one is sacred. Don't worry, I said. This is not something you can put into a document. But the best part of the rebuild wasn't the Hawkins lectures. It was seeing the younger staff prove they only needed a chance. A week later, while I was reviewing the thermal alert system, my desk buzzed nonstop. A message from Malik. North Station just triggered an overload alert. I'm heading there now. I grabbed my keys to run out the door when a second message arrived. Found the source. A voltage divider with a compromised lead. Overheating. I can handle it. I stopped. I called him. You sure? On the other end, Malik was out of breath. I'm sure, Shide. I used your new procedure. I'll send photos. 10 minutes later, the grid stabilized. No outage, no domino failures, no nursing home is in danger. The team gathered to review the data. Marla turned her chair toward Malik. Well done. Hawkins slapped his shoulder. I smell victory, not burning. I looked at the three of them. Three people who were never given the chance to do something big. And for the first time, I wasn't the one running into the Texas heat to save the grid. A young technician had done it, someone the company had once labeled as not capable enough. The following week brought the second heat wave. Temperatures hit 43 degrees. The Weather Service issued statewide blackout warnings. But in our control room, everything held steady. No red alerts, no emergency calls. Everything stood firm. Victor stepped in, arms crossed, staring at the screens for several seconds. I can't remember the last time the system looked this calm. Before we had you, Hawkins said and winked, or maybe before you became a manager. Victor laughed. It's been a long time since anyone dared say that to me. I sat in my swivel chair, watching the control board lights pulse in a steady rhythm. Strange. None of us said it out loud, but everyone felt the shift. Not because I had a new title, not because Rachel went silent, not because of last week's win, but because this summer, none of us had to chase after mistakes that made our hearts drop. The system stood firm. The team stood firm. And for the first time in years, I felt myself standing firm too, not alone, but with people who had finally been given the chance to grow. That summer ended quietly, almost as if the power grid itself finally exhaled with us. The days hotter than steel on the highway now lived only in the end of the month report. No more red alerts, no more sprinting from station to station like firefighters. No more watching the clock with one eye and the sky with the other, waiting for the next heat storm to fall. I came home on time. Something that sounds simple, but for someone who keeps the power running, it might as well be a gift. My wife was making dinner. When I walked into the kitchen, she looked at the clock, then at me. Home on time again. I'm starting to wonder if you're actually my husband, I laughed. If I'm a duplicate, this one knows to wash his hands before eating. We sat down at the table. No rush, no tension, no alarms or emergency texts. Just two people at an age where quiet dinners matter more than anything flashy. In the middle of reaching for the vegetables, my phone buzzed softly. A new message from Victor. I opened it, read it, and set the phone down. I didn't say anything. My wife eyed me like I had just received test results. Bad news. Depends how you look at it, I said, and handed her the phone. The message had only one sentence. The board wants to move you into a vice president equivalent position. We talk in the morning. She placed the phone down, stared at me for a long moment, then burst out laughing. What are you going to do? Buy a cake? Throw a party? Invite Hawkins over to celebrate? I shook my head. No, I just want to finish this dinner. She looked at me for another second, then nodded, understanding what I didn't say out loud. I didn't need a big celebration. I didn't need champagne. I didn't need to shout that my work had finally been recognized. I just smiled. Light, small, enough. Because sometimes recognition doesn't come with applause. It comes when you know you're standing tall again, not holding the whole world up with tired hands. And it comes when the system stays standing without you having to save it every day. After dinner, I stepped out to the porch and leaned back into the old wooden chair my father built 30 years ago. The late summer Texas sky still breathed heat, but the anger of the last heat wave was gone. The streetlight cast a warm gold over the yard. Steady, unflickering. A small thing, but for someone who spent his life keeping the power alive, it felt like poetry. I thought about the road behind me, the storm nights. The shifts are longer than the darkness. The times I ran to a station while everyone else hid indoors. The tiny faults I fixed so no one else ever knew. The disappointments. The promotions were wrapped in clever excuses that never came. And I understood something you only truly learn with age. Going the extra mile is admirable, but only when people see that you walked it. When the extra mile becomes the default, the expectation, the burden someone that assumes you will carry without question, that's when you need to return to your own path, not the longer one, not the one others place on your shoulders, but the one straight enough, bright enough for you to see your own worth clearly. I closed my eyes for a few seconds and let the night breeze carry the lightness I thought I had lost long ago. Maybe that's something not written in any job description. Feeling like life no longer demands that you clench your fists just to stay afloat. Some people spend their whole lives keeping everything running. Power grids, machines, companies, families, even the lives of others, and still are rarely truly seen. If you're one of those people, I understand you more than you think. And if this story brings you back to a chapter of your life, those years when you carried more than anyone realized, then I want to say this. You are not alone. And I want to invite you to stay here with me, where I tell stories for those who work behind the scenes of the world. If you see yourself in this story, hit subscribe. I have more stories to tell for the people who keep the lights on, keep the wheels turning, keep everything running, and rarely get seen. Because sometimes just being seen is a reward big enough.